Okay, I am going to do a short tutorial on dyeing. Most of this is pretty much for my benefit, just so I remember what I did, because the last time I did this, I forgot what I did. So I'm going to record it, and if it comes out and it's informative when it's done, then I will post it as a short tutorial. So here we go. Okay, so here are all my supplies for dyeing, not including Sammy, but she thinks she needs to help me. I have my yarn, and today I'm going to use some mason jars for dyeing. All of the products that I use for my dyeing, I use exclusively for dyeing. I do not use them for my regular cooking. I have some vinegar, which I'm not really sure is necessary when you're using acid dyes, but I've used vinegar with everything that I've ever dyed. It doesn't hurt, so I just go ahead and use vinegar. I also have some gloves that I use. I highly recommend, no matter what type of dyeing you're doing, if you're using Kool-Aid, acid dyes, or Wilton's cake dyes, definitely wear gloves. I also have some bottles here that you'll notice. They are actually water bottles that we got from Costco. It's their Vita Rain. And I like these bottles because I can use them to store excess dye that I don't use. I usually mix up my dye and put my colors in these things and then store the dyes in there for future use. You will notice on the top I have labeled them as to which colors they are so that I can remember for next time. I also have samples here of things that I have dyed, and they are also labeled with the colors. So when I come back to dyeing, I can say, oh, I like these colors, I'm going to use these. Also, you'll notice that I have a trash bag on my counter here. And the reason I do that is today is not going to be used so much, but if I was doing some hand painting with the dyes, you want to protect your countertop so that no dye gets on your countertop. Today I'm just going to be doing the mason jars, so I probably really don't even need that, but I'm just doing that to protect the counter. Also, I want to show you, I have my yarn, and I also have this crochet cotton here too, because I didn't feel like the yarn was tied well enough. So you'll see here that I have put an extra couple of ties on the yarn just to keep it together a little bit more. The more ties you put on, the harder it is for the dyes to get into the yarn, but because I am just doing basically some tonal colors today, I'm okay with having the extra ties on there. So I will get started, and then as I do my process, I will check back in with you guys. Okay, so I'm going to start by mixing a little bit more of my green dye. Now, I have to say that I am not very precise on my measurements. I just kind of pour it in and see what I get, and if I need more dye, then I put more in. Because I'm not a dyer and I'm not trying to recreate exactly, this works fine for me. Now, I'm just going to put some dye in here in my jar, or my bottle, and I'm just going to add a little bit of water, and I'm also going to add my vinegar. And like I said, I'm not sure if vinegar is necessary with the acid dyes, but again, it doesn't hurt anything, so I just do it. And then I will put the top on and give it a good shake. I also need to mix up some pink, And I am going to rinse my measuring spoon because there's always a tiny bit of dye left over on it. And then I'm going to mix some more pink. And I think the more color you use, the brighter it is. But there's also a point where you can have too much dye and it's never going to be absorbed. So again, I'm going to put some water in my bottle here, and then I'm going to add my vinegar. And I do like to mix things up and then let them sit for a little bit, just to make sure that all of the dye is mixed up in there. Sometimes I will take another little sample, which I probably will do here, just to see where we are with the colors on these two. So I'm going to do that, and I will be right back with you. Okay, so typically I would soak my yarn before I start to dye them, but today, because I want a tonal variegated color, I'm not going to do that. And I have put just a tiny bit of the dye in a bowl here. Again, this is all stuff that I only use for dyeing, just to absorb the color. I've done it with both with the green and the pink. And the green is looking pretty good. I like the color of the, oops. This is why we protect our counter. And also, I always have a roll of paper towels handy to be able to grab to wipe off my hands, because the dye can be messy. And another way to test is you can always just dip in a paper towel and you can see the color there too. So the green is looking pretty good, but I think the pink needs a little bit more color, because we're not getting a very bright pink there just yet. Not as bright as this pink that I had dyed before. So I'm going to stop and put some more color in my bottle here, and then I will do another sample after that. Okay, I have redone my pink, and I'm liking this color a little bit better. So I think that this is the color that I'm going to go with. And the green, we already decided that was good. Now, this yarn, now this is my little swatch of the first pink. This yarn is not, the dye is not set on these yarns. So if I were just to take them out of the dye, rinse them, and then dry them, more than likely the dye is going to run and it's eventually going to fade. You have to heat set your dyes in order for them to stay on the fiber. I'm not going to worry about these samples because they're just samples. And what I'm using for samples is just, I have one skein that I just keep for samples, and I just pull off a hunk of it. So it's nothing special, just a little piece of yarn. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and start my first color. And I'm going to start with the green, because the green is actually just my practice, because again, I'm not really sure what I'm going to do yet. So I'm just going to take this green, and I'm just going to put a tiny bit in there. And I'm not going to really measure it or anything like that. This first round is going to be primarily just to get a little bit of color on the yarn to start. And then I'm going to fill this up primarily with water and a little bit of vinegar. And I'm not going to fill it all the way up, because I still got to get my yarn in there and I don't want it to overflow. And just a little bit of vinegar. And again, I don't like to measure. So a splash of this, a splash of that. And then I'm going to take my yarn, which has not been soaked. Again, I typically soak my yarn when I'm going to do like a hand paint or whatever. But today I'm experimenting and I'm just going to stick it in there like this. So I'm going to just shove it all down in there. Hopefully we're not going to overflow, but I'm going to watch it as it goes in. Make sure that we don't get too overflowed. And I'm going to shove it all down in there. And it will slowly absorb the water. And I'm going to fill it up all the way now with some more water. And I think I'm going to add just a little bit more vinegar in there too, because I didn't really put that much in there. And I'm going to continue to fill it up until it's completely full, until the water is over top of the yarn. Okay, so now the water is over top of the yarn, and I'm ready to put it in the microwave for its first heat set. Okay, so I'm going to put this in the microwave for 2 minutes, and while this is in the microwave, I'm going to get the next color ready. So that's what we have so far. Okay, and I will be right back with the next color. Okay, I have prepared the next one. Here is the pink, and this is ready to go in the microwave. The green has just come out, so I'm going to go and change it and put this one in. So the pink will be in there for 2 minutes. Now, this is not that hot, but as I continue to heat it, it will get hotter. So you may need to use some kind of a oven mitt or something to take it out of the microwave when you take it out. So now this has been out of the microwave. Typically I would let it cool, but really it's not that hot. It's very cool to touch. So I'm going to go ahead and take this out and take out all the excess water, and then I'll start my next batch. So hang tight and I will show you that part. Okay, so it was a little bit warmer than I thought, but it's okay because we're going to put it right back in the microwave. So here's what it looks like right now. So you can see that this end is a little bit darker and this end has just splotches. I'm not sure if you'll actually be able to pick it up, but this end just has splotches of green. So I'm going to go ahead and put another batch in for green. And this time I'm going to put a little bit more dye in the jar so that it's going to be a little bit darker. And I'm going to do the same thing. I'm going to fill it up mostly with water. And then add some vinegar. And then when I put this in, I don't want to put the dark side down into the dark color. So I'm going to kind of rotate it around a little bit and put a slightly lighter side down first. Maybe not the lightest side, but a slightly lighter side. So I'm going to push this down in there, and it will go down a little bit easier because it is already wet now. And again, I'm going to watch to make sure we don't overflow. Now I'm ready to put this in the microwave for the next round. Okay, so I did the same thing for the pink. The pink is going to go into another dye bath in a moment. But what I did want to mention is that when I took the yarn out of the water came out completely clear, which means that all the dye that was in the water was completely absorbed. And that's kind of what you want. You want to make sure, well, you want your dye to be absorbed because you don't want to waste it, number one. But if you find that there is dye coming out in the water, then you might have a little bit too much dye in your dye bath. So you can either use the leftover dye if I have dye coming out in my water, sometimes I'll just pour it right back into my jar or my bottle that I store my dye in, just because I don't want to waste any of it. So here's the pink, how it looks right now. You'll see again the end of the pink that's a little darker, and then I'm going to go ahead and put it in the next round for a slightly darker pink. So I will do that, and then I will be back. Okay, so now my green is out for the second time, and you'll see that there's still some white spots here and some darker green spots. This isn't coming out quite as variegated as I was thinking it would, but it's not too bad. So, but I do want to try and get more of these colors or some of this white out of here, because I would like to be mostly green. So I'm going to go ahead and mix up one more batch, and I'm going to not put as much water in it at first, just the green, and then once I put all my yarn in, then I will top it off with water. That way the stuff on the top shouldn't get as much color. So again, I'm going to put some green in the bottom. And in fact, I think I'm going to go ahead and just put it right in here without the water first. And so then we're going to get some really vibrant colors there at the bottom, I think. So we'll put it in there and shove it down in there real good. And then I'm going to fill it up and top it off with the water. Again, I have no clue how this is going to come out. This is all an experiment. Okay, now I'm doing my last color, which is going to be turquoise. And I've put just a tiny, tiny bit of dye in the bottom, and then filled it up halfway with water. And then I'm going to add my vinegar. And I'm going to shove this down in there, just like I did the other two. And again, because this yarn has not been soaked, it takes a little bit more to get it down in there. And we want to make sure that it doesn't start coming out the top too much. And then I will top it off with the water, and then it will go in the microwave for 2 minutes again. Okay, the pink has come out, and you will see that there are some darker spots and some lighter spots. It's still not quite exactly what I want, so I'm going to go ahead and do another dye bath in the jar again with a little bit darker. And or just try and get some of this more down, some of this lighter stuff down further in the bottom with the pink. So again, that's that. I'm gonna go ahead and mix it up. And I am going to kind of figure out approximately where it is, and I'm going to dunk it back in directly like I did the green. And then I will add my water. And a little bit more vinegar. And that will go back in the dye bath, or back in the microwave in a moment. And I'm also going to go ahead and take out the green. And again, you will see that where I stuck it in, right on top of the dye, it is a little bit darker down there. There are still spots that have less dye on them, and so I'm going to go ahead and run it through one more time and see where it comes out. Okay, this time for the green, I think what I'm going to do, I've got the dye a little bit in the bottom, and I'm going to go ahead and select an area that has less dye on it to go down in the pan in the bottom first. But I also want to make sure that what's at the top has a little bit less dye, because I'm going to put a little bit of extra dye on the top as well, just to try and variegate it a little bit more. So I'm going to put that down in there like that, and then I'm just going to kind of dot a little bit of dye right there on top, and then I'm going to fill it up with water. And we're going to see how that works out. And I also have to put a little bit more vinegar in there. So that will go back in the microwave as well. Okay, so here's the turquoise, the first time out of the dye bath. And I noticed here that the turquoise is quite bright here. Not bright, like not good bright, but it's a lot darker than, say, the green and the pink when we first came out in the first batch. And I think it's because I probably put more dye in the water for the turquoise than I did for the other two. But I had already had the turquoise mixed up, and so I just went ahead and went with it. And this is why I like to put the extra ties, because you see the mess that this is becoming. So I'm going to go ahead. Oh, this is becoming quite a mess. I'm going to go ahead and figure out this problem. But then I'm going to put this turquoise through the next few rounds of color, and then we will be back to see how it all turns out. Okay, I'm finding that I like the variegation in color better when I put the dye in the bottom of the jar and then put my yarn in and then add the water last. Because look at the nice variegation in this pink color. I hope you can see it. It's hard for me to see the screen. So I think I'm going to run the pink through one more time. I've already set the green up again for one more round of green, and then we'll see where we are from there. Okay, so here are our pink and green so far. And the nice thing about dyeing, if you start light, you can always go darker, but once you go too dark, it's done. Here's the green, and it is very nicely tonal. And I'm getting my stuff all mixed up again. It's very, very nice, with nice variation in those colors. There are some much lighter spots in here, but I'm okay with that. I want to have that in the yarn. So I think I'm done with the green. I think I'm going to leave the green just as is. The pink looks very nice too, but we still have quite a bit of white in this area. So I think I'm going to run the pink through one more time just to see if we can't get it a little bit darker. Okay, so here are my final three colors. Again, the turquoise still has a little bit of white in there, but I'm not going to worry too much about it. I'm just going to, actually, I might run it through one more time before I call it quits, because there is still quite a bit of white in there. But I like how it looks with the pink, which is what I was trying to go for. The pink and the turquoise are what I'm going to use, along with a natural color, or what I'm going to use for my colorwork mittens for the November December knit along. One thing that I forgot to mention at the beginning was I got this sock yarn from Wool to Dye For. They have a large array of different yarns, different fibers, different weights, all of that you can get for dyeing. I get my yarn there. You can get it at other places as well. There's tons of places online that you can get it. I just find that they have such a nice selection, and I can get exactly what I want. So that is my dyeing tutorial for dyeing in a mason jar, and I hope you enjoyed it. And I hope it will encourage you to take some time and dye some fiber or yarn, especially if you're looking for a specific color. So thanks for watching. Bye. Okay, so I'm back. See, I always forget things. When I'm done dyeing, I like to roll my yarn in a ShamWow and get out all the excess water as much as possible. No matter how hard you try, you will not get out all of the water and it will still drip. But this is a good way to get out a lot of it. I've also heard that you can use salad spinner, which I don't have, but if I did, I would use it to get some excess water out as well. So I just use the ShamWow and then I hang my yarn up to dry. So there you go. Here is the yarn. I just hang it on some coat hooks and hang it up to dry. And then I also put a ShamWow underneath it to catch. So there you go.